wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And before we jump in today's podcast, Blessing the Way in Birth and Motherhood, just a quick reminder to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au. And on our homepage, just there, you'll see a little form to join our tribe, which is just a name and email address. Once a week, we will send you a wrap-up with all of the links and a bit of a blurb about anything we've podcast on, blogged on, what's happening in our lives that we, would share with friends or with each other that's been pretty special or, profound for us in that week. And then occasionally we'll send you an extra email that's more about a toolkit or an awakening that we've had that's more of a personal deep dive. So if you'd love to continue your learnings with us during the week, then please jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au.
Yes, and this is such a beautiful topic to be settling into after having Julie's Blessing Way just last night. So we pre-record and it's now Sunday afternoon here, and you've had a whole day really to reflect on the beautiful ceremony and ritual and just holding of space that was last night. So I think what we really need to do for our listeners, some of whom may have been to a Blessing Way before, some of whom may have heard of one, and others who may have never even heard of the concept really, and perhaps are much more familiar with the baby shower type approach to welcoming a new baby. So I might hand over to Jules just to give your perspective on, first of all, what a Blessing Way is, and then we can bring into the podcast some of the beautiful stuff that unfolded last night for you.
Yeah, for sure. So I probably want to start with the word Blessing Way itself. It is a sacred word to the traditional Navajo Indians. It's one of their sacred rituals and rites of passage around movement from being woman as you are into mother as you will be. So it's an honouring ceremony that is steeped in many rituals that really is about literally blessing the way for this woman. So where the baby shower is focused around the baby, the Blessing Way is focused around the nourishment of the mother. It recognises what she is being called into and what is being called of her in order to, facilitate the movement of life through her body in whatever form that happens, and soul, and honours and gives space and breath to fears and to vulnerability, that all of that comes up that you may not have had a space to push up until that point, and yet, as you and I both know, is really pivotal in coming on board in a full heart, soul, body way to being ready in a full sense for birth and whatever this next evolution calls us into. So the Blessing Way has many different formats depending on which rituals you're choosing to include or exclude. It can also be called a mother blessing or a belly blessing. You can call it a number of things. I love the Blessing Way, and I do honour that it is a sacred ritual as well of the traditional Navajo Indians, but I love that word and just the intention of blessing the way, that it's a gathering of the most intimate women to you that are there to just hold and nourish your space, and in doing that nourish themselves, because we all know that that oxytocin just pumps and it becomes a giving and receiving. It's not just this focus on this one person, it's very much a held space, and that's what I adore about it. So I hope that wasn't too waffly.
No, and I love that, and I love how you recognise, and this is what really resonates for me too, is the idea of how much it's not simply just for the woman giving birth and the woman entering into that new evolution of motherhood. It's for her circle, and it's the power that this ritual gives the whole circle to step into more of their own full embodiment and to lean into the parts of themselves that they're resistant to or perhaps haven't given space to awakening yet. And that was what was so lovely about your ceremony and the women who all came together so willing, and some of whom really hadn't been in a space like that before.
There were a couple that hadn't remotely.
But the willingness to bring their whole selves into that space and share, and I think this is what's so beautiful, is that so quickly when you're in circle like that, there is that vulnerability that it paves the way for really a beautiful intimacy and a beautiful sense of connection, because you're asked to share, first of all, you know, what we all loved about Jules, which is just such a wonderful thing to be able to deeply honour a person and see that reflected in all of the other women who are really close to that one woman, and in that it almost creates a sense of depth and understanding between all of the women, because you realise what you each share, what you each find in common. And as
that woman, how often do we allow ourselves just to have that energy beamed at us, you know, to really soak in the impact that we have on other women's lives and the depth of love that's there. Like, we never really have opportunity and space to just, you know, soak it into our bodies and souls. I mean, it's deeply... I don't even know the profound matches it.
And at the same time enormously humbling, because it's so easy to forget. And we all of our tribe find this in the Loathing to Loving program, how difficult the Genius Week can be, because so often you don't see what it is other people see in you. And I mean, last night you had 16 or 17 women reflecting back to you the essence of you.
I know, it was really like I had to keep reminding myself, open up, soak it in, because there's a few times I wanted to, you know, shut my shoulders in and kind of go, oh, that's too much, you know, and I had to keep going, open, you know, like absorb, like this is the time and the space to do that.
And in fact, I was watching your mother and wondering how she was feeling hearing all of that.
Yeah, look, it was the first time my mum's ever been at anything to do with any of the births of my babies in that really intimate way. It's the first time she's ever been in circle with me. It's the first time she's ever been in circle, full stop. Like, that's not her world. She doesn't know me outside of, her perception of me. And I think I'd said in previous podcast when we had started this whole pregnancy journey was my mum started listening to the podcast and it was her first kind of, oh my God, is that my daughter? Like, she couldn't almost connect the dots between the two, which is totally fine, because I'm not there to shove any of me or what, you know, is hard for her down her throat. And so to some extent there's only a certain way that she's probably perceived me up until that point. And I think last night was another layer of that, because she's never kind of been in that women's circle world with me. She's never steeped in that with me. And then, you know, as she, you know, very vulnerably said, was to hear all of these women speaking these, you know, incredible, gracious and profound things about her daughter. She just almost didn't know what to do with that. It was so big for her.
But she commented how proud she felt. That an immense amount of pride, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah.
It was really nice. And it was the first time I felt no cringiness about her being there as well, because normally I have like all these like, you know, you said this or you did that or whatever. But I didn't have any harbourings around needing to shut any part of me down because she was there, which was really lovely, and I think probably actually speaks volumes of what this pregnancy has really shifted in our relationship.
It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, it really is.
And so there's a couple of different elements to your blessing way in particular, and you put a lot of thought into, you know, how you wanted it to come together so that it would not only hold the space for the women there and really give them an opportunity to speak their own truth and really settle into the ritual of it, but also that you wanted it to be a real intention-setting pathway for what's to come for both yourself, this baby, and for your family. And particularly, I guess, because it's a pregnancy that's come about without a lot of conscious intention, and so this is a moment.
It's been a tough road.
But this is the moment to then go, okay, I want this to be a shifting of gears. And so how much for you was that a key thing?
My God, like I'm probably going to cry from here on out. Like, it was just, like you can't see me, obviously you're listening, but I'm touching my hand to my heart, because this is the purpose of sacred ritual, of ceremony and of gathering of women. That's the power that we share, is to be able to be, and I think I said completely and totally, you know, raw and ugly and honest and speak my deepest fears and what we might consider our ugliest aspects of our mental thought processes, to just be able to kind of spew it all out and go, you know, here's still what I'm holding on to, and I want to, like, the burning of fears ceremony is probably, for me, the most sacred part of a blessing way. And everyone has an opportunity to speak a fear and burn it, and that space is held. And it comes around to the mother-to-be to speak what's left. What does she need to be held in letting go of in order to be fully here for this experience and this baby and this new version of motherhood, because we change each time. And I was still holding on to a whole lot of stuff, I mean, as you already know, but I was still holding on to this, and I was thinking and really reflecting on it last night. It's funny. So after I kind of spewed all of this out and all my ugly truth and, you know, all those shameful parts that we still think we can ignore, let it all out. And then I was like, instantly felt this shift in my body and just went, oh, it's like the tantruming 3-year-old, you know, I'm stomaching it going, but I just don't wanna. Like it was saying that still the part I'm struggling with is embracing the hard part that I know is coming, because every baby breaks us in some way. And, you know, I love the breaking and the putting back together and all of that. But there's also this huge part of me that's looking at this side of that big storm going, oh, but I just don't want to be that. Come on, let's have the easy road, which is such a fantasy and ridiculous illusion anyway. But I could just for the first time see this screaming 3-year-old. And last night when I was lying in bed on my own after this whole ceremony, I was really sitting with that. And for the first time, I wasn't dragged into the story of that. I wasn't gripped by the fear of that. I was just able to sit, I suppose, in a way with my inner loving mother and look at my inner 3-year-old and go, I get that. You know, I really looked at visualizing myself like I would my current 3-year-old. And if she's having this tantrum that's, you know, to some extent ridiculous and disproportionate to the situation, what would I do with her? And I would hold her space. And I would let her rage, and I would hear it all, and I would reflect it back to her. And I did that for myself. And honestly, not that it's like poof, gone, but I'm not gripped.
It's taken some of the edges off.
Yeah, I don't feel run by it now.
And what I think the ritual and the ceremony and the incredible beauty with which a blessing way comes together does is that it almost, by way of the nature of it, it gets you wide open. You know, it's almost like there's something about stepping across that threshold into a space that's been so beautifully set up to create this circle and to create this movement of energy and intention, is that it leaves you so willing to be seen and so willing to shift. I mean, as we all had beautiful flower crowns, and I was putting mine on, and like I was just overcome with emotion even before we'd really commenced, because I knew what it meant. Knew what it's not just a catch up with friends. It's this incredible amount of depth to it, and it's so much to do with the intention with which every woman is there to help ground and support and listen to that birthing woman.
And we all want to do that for our friends, but we don't have a place for that in this culture, and we don't know how to. And to have a space where you're shown a direction and a way in which to do that, I also think is immensely gifting and reciprocal between that mother-to-be and the women that she has in the circle with her, because we all want to do that for our friends, but we don't know how often. There's not a space or a path or a easy access route to be able to do that. And by creating the intention, and it's energetic too, right? I mean, it's very focused. I spend a lot of time, I've realised actually, Bridget, and I wonder what that will morph into for me, is I do think ritual is or the setting up of ceremony / holding space is a genius of mine, because I never kind of realised I had all these beautiful women around me with, you know, who do circle work, and I thought that was largely, we all found that effortless, but I realise there's a certain way I go about thinking about almost like a recipe, the movement of energy from one ritual to the next, and how that works and looks, and how we move between those spaces. And so the intention with which I set those up creates a space that you walk into and already you're immersed in, regardless of whether it's the first time you've ever been to one or
I don't doubt that for a moment. I mean, like last night was effortless to be into that space because of the intention with which you'd set it up. And I mean, reflecting on my own blessing way that you ran and so beautifully created for me a year ago, that space, particularly with women who really none of them had been to one before.
No, so I wanted to ask you about that, because that was that your first experience of Blessing Way as well?
It wasn't my first experience, but it was my first in a space that was very ceremonious in its structure. So I'd been to them before, but they were a bit more coupled together.
How so? Do you want to sort of explain that spectrum?
Well, one of them was held like in a sort of like a school hall, and it was. And there were kids around, so it wasn't able to be a strong women's circle as such. And in terms of, because with the circle, ideally it doesn't get broken. So once you sit in circle, you are all there and focused. And I think when there's children in the background, it's very difficult to hold that space. And there was a lot of kind of people getting up and interruptions, and it just didn't have that same sense of feeling supported and held, like what you'd created for me and what I was part of last night. I think it was also just wasn't set up with candles and with intention and with beauty the way that I really see Blessing Way needs to be done to really hold that woman in reverence. So
and to call out the goddess energy out of every woman.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the whole point of doing things that we might consider, ridiculous, like flower crowns, or, I have these beautiful satin coloured sheets that I place around, and candles and, mandalas. The purpose of beauty is to call out our goddess who knows ritual. We are instinctively born in ritual, and yet we forget. And so there's these ways to really, call it out, to
to beckon it out of these women, and so that's probably the difference. But I also noticed comparing, and it so much does depend on the willingness of the women in the room to bring themselves fully into the space, and how well I think women bring themselves into the space is set up a lot by who is running the circle, and that was what was so lovely.
I completely agree
about
with that.
I mean, Brie holds the circle beautifully,
yes,
and so do you. But I mean, even with my own friend group, because there was no one else who'd really been to a Blessing Way, except maybe one or two people, I could still feel the resistance in some people about really being in it. And it felt like a bigger...
Let's talk about that, because for some of our listeners, if they're wanting to create a sacred space, and there's such a spectrum on what that looks like. It doesn't have to be like mine in order to be profound. And I think we probably need to talk about your experience as well, and what that was like, why you chose it. I think I would like to know how that setup was for you with women that had never been in circle before, who were largely mainstream and generally not part of a conscious tribe, let's say. Your mum had a fair bit of resistance with it.
Yeah.
So maybe just because that could be some of our tribe's reality.
Totally. And I mean, like, looking back, I can totally see that and I would call on women to think about this too. The resistance in them was, on some level, the resistance in me.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me about that.
Because they're only able to show up and really honour the space as much as I am able to show up and honour the space and honour myself in the space.
So tell me about that then.
Well, I still feel like that there was a resistance. I think that particularly being in your genius too, I was conscious of how I sat in that and how I allowed you to do your thing at the same time as me show up and be my vulnerable self. And there was a part of me that wasn't able to do that. And I mean, there's a part of me that I'm still trying to work out, wasn't able to do that to obviously have the birth that I wanted on some level and show up enough to myself in that. And
so with that, do you mean it was awkward for you having me there and you being in that space? Can you kind of extrapolate that?
Well, I don't think it was awkward that really. I think there was so many dynamics going on for me, like particularly with my mum, and I'd been sick I had that bronchitis for probably was coming to the end of it but at that point, and a lot of that was to do with my mother and just this kind of getting my mum okay with the home birth and the whole scenario that I was seeking. And I could just sense almost perhaps that there was a little bit of her feeling not needed by me as much anymore in a maternal sense, because I was showing up more for myself, you know, and that you were playing that role for me more as my doula and as, you know, me really leading into this more conscious sort of intention with this daughter and this birth and all that kind of stuff.
That
so
mother energy was shifting.
It was shifting, and I definitely do see that there was perhaps on some level almost like a sense of grief there for her around that shift,
which you were clearly tuned into.
Yeah, and so not almost knowing how to move with that, and therefore sitting in. You know, and I got a little bit vulnerable in that, in that I was, you know, bearing my fears of loss. I mean, it's a common theme for me, is the fear of loss, and able to bear that. But I obviously wasn't able to bear it enough and pave the way, therefore, for the other women to show up just the way that I wanted them to at the same time. Like, you know, to show up with the level of vulnerability and open-hearted, you know, tears, you know, because I know that tears are powerful, and they were flowing so much from me. I mean, I definitely cried way more at your blessing way than I did at my own.
I kind of love that. You were sitting next to me, and every time you cried, I just felt that softness, and I was just like, oh.
Yeah, like I was just letting them flow.
I loved it.
And it's on some level.
Me too. And they were lovely though.
Yeah.
It's such a space to just feel those big fat tears rolling down your face. It's such a release.
And actually to not even brush them away.
Yeah, just to feel them.
And I was actually thinking about that and thinking in some ways I've come a long way in myself. Because I'm great at holding space for my children, but I'm not always great at holding space for myself. And to actually sit in them and
be able to do that for you.
But not even not even need to wipe them off, just allow them to drop.
Because there's no shame.
Because there's I'm not putting up any facade, pretenses, nothing. I'm just showing up as myself, as a vessel for, you know, serving this woman and holding space for this woman and this baby and having reverence for the very circle that I was in. And the space that I was in then and now.
That's amazing.
That's what I love about it. And that's what I guess the
coming back to your blessing way though, I mean, we can look at it and say, you know, the tears weren't flowing as freely as they did in mine, but I don't think that makes it less healing, because what came out of your blessing way was, whilst it had a slightly different energy to it, every one of your friends felt something profound there that they had never felt before and had never experienced before. And for a couple of them, I believe, and please correct me, is that it was really a poignant sensation for them.
There were a couple definitely who were just so moved by it, for sure. And it definitely did open.
So you can't judge vulnerability, right? Because vulnerability is vulnerability.
And it's one of those things, I mean, it's a similar thing to also like me running my own events or me having my own birthday party. Like you sometimes have more fun at other people's things than your own because of that, you know, feeling within you. I don't know if other people have that feeling, but it's almost the needing to show up and be not simply there for yourself, but there for the broader audience, I suppose, on some level. It's why I've often loved other people's birthday parties more than my own, because it's not needing to be anything but simply who you are, and there's less of that needing to be in the spotlight when you're part of a circle as opposed to being the centre of the circle.
So why did you choose a blessing way then, having never really experienced?
Because I really knew how much this pregnancy had come from an incredible amount of intention and inner awakening. And I really wanted to pave the way for those last weeks and days, and pave the way for this birth that I was really seeking to intentionally create. And I saw it as a beautiful way to do that. And it was remarkable. And I felt like a goddess. And yeah, I mean, I look at photos and it's just divine. But it was also a time, and, you know, and even since then, part of if you look at nothing being missing, and I know you feel this too, when you have a toolkit and you are developing a really rich relationship with yourself, sometimes that can come at the cost of other close relationships with people, which has meant that I haven't had super close girlfriends for a couple of years. You know, ones who I would call up and bawl my eyes out to, because I just haven't been seeking that as much, because I've been on this journey, I guess, with what you and I do, and it's come in other forms, and it hasn't come in the form of those social relationships. So I think it also
the next
depends.
evolution. I think when we do it for ourselves, then we can expand that energy outwards.
Yeah. So it was also reflective of where my social relationships were at that time as well, as to how that played out. But I mean, it was still beautiful, and I still
it was beautiful.
You know, totally.
But that's why I want to say a blessing way is a spectrum.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be this one deep, tearful, hippie boho thing that freaks you out in order for it to be worthy. That there's a complete spectrum, and depending on what that mother needs is how you tailor the ceremony. And depending on who's there and who runs it, as you say, who holds that space, because we throw it out there, but it is genuinely a gift and a genius. I know we talk about this in our group as well, is that holding space is not like this la-la thing. You literally have a genius of being able to energetically hold a number of people in there, whatever, or you can't do it. And likely that's reflective of how much you can do it for yourself, of course, but also how expanded that wisdom and genius is how many you can do that for.
Yeah.
So it does really, requires a lot of intention. But I think whoever is there and however it comes about is perfect for that time, that place, that space, that woman, that pregnancy, that birth, and the women that are there.
And particularly because with this group, some of the group of girls that were at mine, it's so much, even though I've been friends for 20 years, would that be right? Some of us, it's still a lot of it's surface stuff, and so there was a depth to where some of those women went, and they didn't wade in it or anything like that. They went in and went out, but that was still profound, and that would still have most certainly paved the way.
What if
for
they
healing.
have no other place for that?
Yeah, no other way to say that, say what they said, and that is what can be so incredibly profound about being in circle with women, and everyone bringing something of themselves, something vulnerable of themselves, and into a space where it's okay.
It requires a level of vulnerability to just even be there, which I think I'd said to you. So when you write up your excuse me, I've still got a cough, blessing way list, it is women who I think you have a deep connection with and who will be part of your next journey. So part of this transition into motherhood, women who will share that journey with you, who will be there with this baby and beyond. And when you do your invites, I always think those that can't be there won't be there. And what I mean by can't is subconsciously really can't be in that space. They've got too many walls up. There's not enough vulnerability that they're really ready to just evoke and step into. And so they can't be there. And that's completely, I honour that as well, because wherever you are at is perfect. But when you put that invite list out, it's not like a party.
No.
It's not like an RSVP to a party. There are feelings that come up just receiving that invite for many women. And a lot of it is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So some are going to choose to be there and some are going to not, or find ways that they can't be there, or create a universe in which they can't be there. And that's completely fine, because it's like birth. Whoever is meant to be there will be there. And if you can't be there, don't be there. If you really are feeling a huge resistance to being there, don't be there. So it's always interesting to me, and always on the day there's usually
a couple that drop off. Because there's stuff that's come up during their week, and that mirror can be just too painful. And I honour that as well. There's no right or wrong there. But just for you to know that when you're setting up a blessing way, that it's not people coming and not coming is not about the depth of feeling they have for you. No. It's about where they are personally at and how much they can show up with for themselves, because there's a level of that that's required just to even walk in your door at that event. And I think that's the power of intention in setting these scenarios up. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know where you want to go.
I'd love for you to reflect, because there was some beautiful, everybody was asked to bring a couple of things into circle. So they're asked to bring a bead to create a labour bracelet for you, which is really lovely, because everybody then puts their energies and thoughts into their collection of their bead. And you know, you're threading it, thinking about all of these women who've come together, and you're almost creating a circle representative of the circle in which you were held.
Literally, and that I will wear.
And then everybody also brought some words or a poem or some intention or a reading around pregnancy and new life for you. Was there any of those that really deeply?
Yeah, look, there was. I've got a couple here, because I've actually put these. I've pulled them out of my to take to hospital birth kit, because I plan on sticking them up on my wall, because it's just something that spoke really, really profoundly to me. And one of them was actually yours, Bridge. So I thought maybe yours might be a good one to start with. Yeah. And then we can have a look at the others. Would you mind reading it?
Yeah. So, it is often said that the first sound we hear in the womb is our mother's heartbeat. Actually, the first sound to vibrate our newly developed hearing apparatus is the pulse of our mother's blood through her veins and arteries. We vibrate to that primordial rhythm even before we have ears to hear. Before we were conceived, we existed in part as an egg in our mother's ovary. All of the eggs a woman will ever carry form in her ovaries while she is a 4-month-old fetus in the womb of her mother. This means our cellular life as an egg begins in the womb of our grandmother. Each of us spent 5 months in our grandmother's womb, and she, in turn, formed within the womb of her grandmother. We vibrate to the rhythms of our mother's blood before she herself is born. And this pulse is the thread of blood that runs all the way back through the grandmothers to the first mother. We all share the blood of the first mother. We are truly children of one blood.
I loved it. I just thought, the pulse of your mother's blood. Like, could there be a more profound statement?
And it just speaks to the incredible...
the lineage.
But the humility that I have with the work that we do. And with the journey of the mother, and with all of the healing that the mother does, and how incredibly profound that ripples out, not only to the immediate family she's with right now, but to generations. Because whenever you shift whoever comes after you.
It's so true.
And I just think that speaks so beautifully to it.
Oh, it really does. I loved it. I loved it. That's why it's coming to the birth with me. And I also thought, being pregnant with a girl, like, how profound. So in essence, you know, my granddaughter or grandson or whoever they end up being is part of
your body right now,
which is amazing.
Wow.
Like, just profound.
And also what another call inwards to nourish. Because if you can't nourish you, like, nourish your children, your grandchildren who are part of you right now, like, that is amazing.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I do think that is a huge part of saying yes to a blessing way. Is yes, I'm worthy of being nourished, and yes, I'm ready to step into my divinity, and yes, I'm ready to be seen. And I think we can so often go, oh no, don't fast, no, I don't need that, and it's so much layering of story that eats away at our self-worth. And yet to set up a ritual like this is just really saying, you know, almost like I'm Woman Hear Me Roar, but not in this, you know, full-bodied Mother Earth grounded way of just saying, I'm here and I honour this and I honour me. And just saying yes to a blessing way, I think, is part of that. Because everyone wants to celebrate it with you, around you. They just don't know how to. And so there's a level of vulnerability in even doing that.
Yeah, I definitely felt into that, for sure.
Yeah.
Just in terms of, and really kind of leaning into that and saying, no, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to honour myself in
because
this.
Don't you have to face those levels of like, oh, it's not okay. And I'm not okay, and, you know, all of those parts of us that we've held on to, those stories that, well, as I say, eat away at our sense of self and worth and, you know, cover layers over our inner goddess. You know, this is a place to pull all of that out. So I really, you know, honour those women that also choose this path in whatever format that takes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next one I have maybe is here. Good place to be. Just as a tree grows best when anchored firmly in the earth, so can a pregnant mother feel strong and capable when supported by a sisterhood of nurturing friends. I thought, yes, like that is the purpose of circle, you know, to be deeply rooted and grounded in your circle that hold you. I mean, it's the whole purpose of everything we do. This one came up twice, so I thought it should be here, and it's one that my mum brought with her. There is power that comes to women when they give birth. They don't ask for it. It simply invades them, accumulates like clouds on the horizon and passes through, carrying a child with it. I just thought, it just speaks of labour and a woman who's been transcended in that process, you know. And then this was actually lyrics that I had never heard of, but this beautiful friend brought lyrics to a Jenny Morris song called Shiver. And it's actually really beautiful. I sat down and read it this morning. So my family stayed out last night. They stayed away at the holiday house. And so my friends probably all left about 1 a.m. after we'd all hung out and chatted, and, you know, dribs and drabs of people had left. And so this morning I got up just to the space as it was, which was beautiful. I really wanted that, to just sit in it again and potter away at things. And I read everything, which was beautiful. I got to read the birth flags and the messages that everybody had written for me. And like, I think I probably spent 4 hours just sobbing. Just divine.
Yeah.
And this was part of that. So this is a song called Little Little. Pulsing away just like thunder in your little ear. Be brave, it won't be long till you meet us. My blood is your blood, I'll fill you to the day I die, dear little little, sweet little little. I love every little thing about you, even though I can't see your shining eyes. I can tell I'm going to love by the way I love you now. And it's your little kick down below that makes me feel the strength of 100 forces. I never felt the power of a love like this before. Noises from outside, you hardly hear it all. Your lifetime pubes with anticipation. No dark and dim thoughts confound your little head, floating in paradise. Remember, little little. I love every little thing about you, even though I can't see your shining eyes. I can tell I'm going to love you by the way I love you now. See what you can do, and you haven't even shown your face to the world yet. I don't know if I can go on. You've got power. We've forgotten. Everybody's born with it, but they leave it. I love every little thing about you, even though I can't see your shining eyes. I can tell I'm going to love you by the way I love you now. And it's your little kick down below that makes me feel strength of 100 forces. I never felt the power of a love like this before. And I love you, little little. I love you, little little. How amazing is that song? We're both sobbing.
Wow.
So I wrote to my friend this morning and I just went, oh my gosh, that song's on my playlist.
Yeah, far out.
They're the most amazing lyrics.
Aren't they beautiful?
Like, just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
So I'm going to follow that up with Bree, who headed my belly, who held circle for me. We've interviewed her before on our Love Bombing podcast. So she's Bree Downs from Bree Downs Birth Support and Photography. And so she wrote me a poem on her own. She said, I couldn't find anything, so I wrote something, and it was actually what started the circle, and I was a mess by the time she'd finished it. And I just thought, I'm taking it with me because it just speaks so wholeheartedly of my journey. And I, you know, that's why I was there. This was the circle for that, you know. And it's called I Am Sure. So beautiful, Bree. If you ever listen to this, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am sure that this journey has not been easy. I am sure you have felt full of doubt and fear. I am sure you have no idea what life with 4 children is going to look like. I am sure you have questioned the path this life has now taken you down. I am sure you are scared. I am sure you are unsure. I am sure this little girl has come with profound purpose. I am sure you and Nick will fall deeper in love with each other by sharing in her delight. And I feel that too, you know, like that's so true. And how messy is that in our humanity, that the things that tear us apart can also just be the most profound experiences of love. Like, what is love, right? It's this two-sided coin.
Totally, but we so often don't want to have the other side. The other side is what has so much depth, doesn't it?
I'm sure your heart will gush as you witness your children falling in love with their new little sister. I'm sure as a mother, you will never have felt so content. I'm sure you will have never have known this kind of joy. And I am sure you've never felt this amount of love. Brie. And I just thought, oh, how much do you get my journey?
Gosh, it's just remarkable.
Big. So, you know, these are the types of things that after we'd done introductions and the women had shared how they knew me and what I had brought to their lives, which was, you know, tearful enough to have a heartfelt connection like that recognised, was everyone shared something like this. Like, it was just, and it didn't matter that they had selected it for me because it spoke to every woman there.
And it's amazing how much there was something for everyone. And I totally recall the same thing at my blessing way too. Like the incredible heart and soul and intention and love that was simply came across through the reading of those words. Whether someone had written a poem themselves or someone had thoughtfully found something that on the internet that resonated with them, all of those things became the fabric with which the rest of the ceremony was built upon.
Totally.
And the rest of the vulnerability from all of the women was grounded upon too. You know, in each of their own different forms. You know, even if it was somewhat reserved, even if it was hidden, you know, it's still there.
That's exactly
it's
right.
still there in their own way.
And that's the beauty of a ceremony like this, is that building of love and depth. And so energetically that continues and it spirals, and then, you know, the second half of the ceremony we bring the light in, or that's how I run it, so that we move deeply, we allow ourselves vulnerability to connect with what's deep and dark and big for us. We have the opportunity to release whatever we're ready to release within that. We do something in the break. We have a break to kind of regroup and re-nourish ourselves and do something for the mother. And then the other side of the ceremony is about coming out of that again and recognising the beauty and the blessing and the courageousness of this circle of women. And that's how I run a ceremony. So, you know, I just, as I said last night, I think we can go a lifetime and never have an experience, no, not one, where we have this connection and depth and vulnerability. And here we are, Bridge, you and I, you know, soaking so many moments of this in, that I just feel like this is just the absolute magnificence and the weaving of a lifetime. Like, we're not going to remember the shoes we bought last week. We're going to remember these moments that spoke to our souls. And that's what this is, and has the capacity to be. And I just think there's such this softening and opening. And, you know, today I felt so mellow and released and reverent, which is lovely, and slow. And I've kind of felt fast up until now, you know, and this was a real experience of just slowness. And when my kids walked back in the house, it was about lunchtime, it was lovely. They all just kind of walked in, and the house was all cleaned up again, so it didn't look like a ceremony. And they were all like, it smells really good in here. And my oldest was like, yeah, it feels really good in here. I was like, yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because this ceremony, you know, it stays. Yeah. And then I involved them in it. So we each had a binding of the cord is another ritual that we do that ties a circle together, and everyone wears a string or a bracelet or whatever, that every time they look at it, they send a wish or a vibe or a thought to the mother-to-be or baby. So it's part of the ceremony, and so I'd made a bracelet for each of them, so they all tied their bracelets on. And then I had some spare wishing lanterns, so we all did a wishing, you know, ceremony. I said it could be anything. It didn't have to be specific to the baby, you know, or to me. And my son went first, and he wrote, like, my daughter's going, you know, she's writing, well, my youngest obviously is doing a scribble, and then my middle daughter's writing things like, oh gosh, what did she say? I don't know, peace and happiness to the world, you know, something like that. I'm like, okay, all right. And then my son writes safe. And I said to him, safe, what does that mean? And he said, you know, safe. I want the baby to be safe and you to be safe and this to be safe. I know, and I just like went, here's my very masculine son who was not in ceremony, who's just completely tuned in. Yeah. I just went, oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
Isn't it amazing? And then my husband did one too, and his was good health for everyone. I thought how interesting also that both him and his dad are kind of on the same wavelength.
Yeah. They're in their provider roles. They're in that incredible, you know, we so often as women can judge the masculine, but they know, there's a knowing. Oh, that is an incredible sensory knowing.
Isn't it? And a holding of space. Yeah. It doesn't look like the gushy feminine, but there's a rooted depth that's like the foundation of a house, you know. And then we had all of this, everyone brought a plate to share, so it's all very decadent, you know, and so I had this table of leftover food that I'd put out knowing they'd walk in, and so we spent like the next 2 hours just, I don't even know what we did. We did nothing. We just hung out and ate and chatted, and the girls wrote a birth flag for me, and I don't know, just sweet connection. I went and had a nap with my husband. The kids were happy pottering, so I went and laid down with him. I just thought this, you know, like we wouldn't be on this ability of that descent into that sort of energy had we not had this ritual to, and that's, it's all me though, right? I mean, you talk about captaining the ship of whatever family that is. Yeah. That's also because of what I've allowed that energy to be, and it lingers in a house. It's the whole point of having a blessing way in your house is that you're held in that energy until birth, you know. So I really invite you to discover what a blessing way could be, or a women's circle or ritual for you in whatever form that takes. If you would like some extra help, I have written a how-to blessing way book on my website, which is thepleasurenutritionist.com.au. It's an instant download. It's only $10. It's full of pictures, and it really, I walk you through rituals and ideas and ways to set it up for yourself.
It's a beautiful
So if you're feeling a little bit lost in how to do that, I know there wasn't a book when I was first getting into it years and years ago. I couldn't find that book that spoke to my I don't know where I was at. So you create it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You write the book that isn't.
Yeah, you create what you perceive is missing.
So please check that out if you're interested. Yeah. And as we pull ourselves out of this, you know,
and I want to say thank you, I mean,
dive.
because I don't doubt for a second how much your own willingness to share with such courage your journey on this pregnancy is helping other women.
Thank you.
So I really want to honour that, because it can be hard sometimes to go to
it
those
is scary.
places.
Yeah. It's scary to say it to ourselves. It's even scarier to hear it heard by others.
So big love.
Thank you. So to connect with us, it's nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. And you, Bridge?
Yes, suburbansandcastles.com. And you, Jules?
thepleasurenutritionist.com.
And do hop on Instagram, because we'll be sharing some photos over the next week or so from the Blessing Way for you to check them out and put some visuals to
get
the story.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening.
If you're still here, I hope that you've at least settled somewhere into your heart space and maybe shed a tear or a sense of poise or reverence within your own body as well. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.